Hello and a very warm welcome to everyone. The topic that I am taking today is pathophysiology of jaundice. Jaundice, it is a very important topic from the practical point of view as well as many problem-based questions they come from this topic. So let's start. So in the last video, I have already told you regarding the bilirubin metabolism. So the bilirubin in the body, it is produced at a rate of 0.2 to 0.3 grams per day, and the source is mainly the senescent or the dying RBCs, which have a lifespan of 120 days. So after the heme is metabolized, the bilirubin it is formed in the body, and when the concentration of this bilirubin in the serum it is more than 2 milligram percent, that condition is known as jaundice, also known as icterus. So in the jaundice, the bilirubin levels are raised beyond 2, and then in addition there is yellowish discoloration of skin or sclera and mucous membranes. The bilirubin, why it gets deposited in the skin and this sclera, because it has got increased affinity for the elastin fibers. So that is the reason there is yellowish discoloration of the skin, mucous membranes and the sclera. Now there is another term which is called latent or subclinical jaundice. So here the bilirubin levels are raised beyond the normal range. So there is hyperbilirubinemia, but the levels are not more than 2 milligram percent. So it will not clinically manifest as jaundice. So that condition is a latent jaundice. Now these figures, it is showing the yellowish discoloration of the sclera. You can see in the sclera, and this is how we demonstrate the icterus. And here you can see the skin that is showing the yellowish discolorations. So these are the clinical pictures of a case of jaundice. Now next we come to important ranges which you should know. Uh, the normal bilirubin range. It is important to know because the problem-based question come from this and can be asked in the Viva also. So the total bilirubin, it is 0.2, 0.3 to 1.2 milligram percent. The total includes conjugated plus unconjugated bilirubin in the serum, which is 0.3 to 1.2 milligram percent. Next is the conjugated fraction of bilirubin, which the normal range is 0 to 0.3 milligram percent. So it should be less than 0.3 milligram percent. Then the unconjugated fraction, which is the most predominant fraction of bilirubin in the body, it is 0.2 to 0.8 milligram percent. So it is important that you remember all these ranges. Jaundice will be defined when the serum bilirubin it is more than 2 milligram percent. Now this bilirubin it comes from the metabolism of the heme, and the major source is the dead and dying RBCs having a lifespan of 120 days. So 85% of this bilirubin it will come from the dead and dying RBCs in the body. Then if there is ineffective erythropoiesis, then again those RBCs will get lysed and will lead to the bilirubin production. And another minor contribution to the bilirubin level come from the other heme proteins like cytochromes P450, etc. So these are the sources of bilirubin which are producing the bilirubin 0.2 to 0.3 gram per day. Now this bilirubin it has to be removed from the body because it is harmful if we have a higher levels of bilirubin. So the bilirubin in the body when it is formed, it is conjugated by the liver and then it changes to its water soluble form, and it can be easily removed from the body. The unconjugated fraction of bilirubin, it is not water soluble. It is bound to albumin and it cannot be excreted from the body. So the body conjugates this bilirubin by the help of certain enzymes, and then the water soluble fraction it gets removed from the body. This is the normal physiology. But what happens in jaundice? In jaundice, there is certain causes of jaundice. There may be increased RBC lysis. The RBC lysis may be overwhelming for the liver to conjugate. That can be the reason. Then there can be various hepatocellular conditions where there is damage to the liver, and because of that, the liver is not able to conjugate the bilirubin. Again, that will cause the increased bilirubin. Then there can be obstruction to the flow of the bilirubin. There can be obstruction in the bile ducts, So that can also cause the increase in the bilirubin level. So that condition is known as bilirubinemia or hyperbilirubinemia, and when it is more than 2 milligram per cent, it leads to jaundice. So jaundice, the bilirubin levels are increased. So sometimes there can be predominantly unconjugated bilirubinemia, and sometimes there can be conjugated bilirubinemia. The conjugated bilirubin differs from the unconjugated bilirubin in certain properties. What are those? Firstly, the conjugated bilirubin, it is water soluble. The unconjugated bilirubin, it is bound to albumin, so it is not filtered by the urine, so it does not come out in the urine. And it is not water soluble, it is water insoluble. And the conjugated fraction, it does not bind to albumin, or if it binds loosely. So if it is in excess, it is excreted in the urine. So these are the differences between the conjugated and unconjugated fraction of bilirubin. Now next we come to the various causes because of which the jaundice can develop in the body. So the first scenario is if we are having predominantly unconjugated bilirubin in the serum. So when that can happen? First, now, bilirubin is produced in the body from the senescent RBCs, we know that. But if in case there is increased RBC destruction in the body, like in case of hemolytic anemias where RBCs are being destroyed, the turnover of RBCs is high. So in that case, again, bilirubin will be high. Then, if there is internal hemorrhage and there is resorption of the blood from that internal hemorrhage, again the bilirubin production will be increased. Then conditions when there is erythropoiesis, but that is ineffective. It is not effectively producing the mature RBCs. Again, those RBCs which are not mature enough, they will be destroyed in the body, and that will produce the bilirubin. So, like conditions of pernicious anemia, thalassemia. So, these are the conditions where the RBC lysis is more, and that is overwhelming for the liver to conjugate. So, liver has a limited capacity to conjugate. So, if there is RBCs, they are lying in a very high rate, so that in that case the liver will not be able to conjugate it, and that will cause predominantly unconjugated bilirubinemia in the blood. So this is the first scenario. Then in the second case, now when the bilirubin is formed, it is unconjugated and it is taken up by the liver cells. We discussed it in the last video. So if there can be certain conditions where there can be reduced uptake by the liver cells. So in again that case, the bilirubin won't be conjugated and the unconjugated bilirubin will be high in the blood. So that can be caused by certain drugs also. Now another important cause is the impaired bilirubin conjugation. So impaired bilirubin conjugation, we know that when a baby is born, so initially the UDP glucuronide transferase activity, this enzyme which causes the conjugation of bilirubin, that this is not in sufficient quantity in the blood. So that enzyme levels in the birth time, they are low, and they reach the adult levels up till 3 to 4 months of age. So at the time of birth, there will be mild unconjugated hyperbilirubinemia. That is called the physiologic jaundice of the newborn. So basically, it is because at the time of birth, this enzyme activity is low in the body. This is that enzyme, UGT glucuronide transferase. So this enzyme activity, it is regulated by the gene UGT1A1, and it is present at the locus 2q37. This is important for the MCQs. So the physiologic jaundice of the newborn develops after 24 hours of birth. And if the jaundice appears within 24 hours of birth, then it is known as pathological jaundice because of other reasons. The physiological jaundice of the newborn, it is further exaggerated by the breast milk feeding. So generally after birth, it is recommended that the baby should be fed with the breast milk, but the breast milk has certain enzymes, beta glucuronidases. So they cause the degradation of the UTP glucuronide transferase, those enzymes which are causing the conjugation of bilirubin. So, if the child is being breastfed, then there are further more chances of him or her developing the physiological jaundice of the newborn. So, these are the two aspects of development of physiological jaundice of the newborn. So, you should remember these 2 points. First is the UGT1A1 activity, which is low at the time of birth. Secondly, the glucuronidases, which cause further increase in the unconjugated bilirubin in a breastfed baby. In case of physiological jaundice, generally in the newborn, the phototherapy is given. Then third scenario is there are certain genetic defects in which there is deficiency of the UDP glucuronide transferase enzyme. So conditions are, one is Crigler-Najjar syndrome 1 and 2. In 1, there is total absence of this enzyme, so it often proves fatal for the newborn. And in 2, there is still some UDP glucuronide transferase activity which is there. So it will result in the milder forms of unconjugated bilirubinemia. So this was all about the conditions where there is predominantly unconjugated hyperbilirubinemia. Now in unconjugated hyperbilirubinemia, you remember that this Crigler-Najjar and Gilbert syndrome, these two are to be learnt for the unconjugated hyperbilirubinemia. So there you can use this mnemonic CNG. So Crigler-Najjar and Gilbert syndrome for unconjugated hyperbilirubinemia. I'm telling you this because there are two other syndromes which are causing the conjugated hyperbilirubinemia, which are the Dubin-Johnson and Rotor syndrome. So you have to remember which syndromes cause which fraction of the bilirubin to increase. Now, if there is unconjugated hyperbilirubinemia, so if there is unconjugated hyperbilirubinemia, there is increased in the unconjugated fraction of bilirubin, also known as indirect bilirubin, because it gives indirect reaction in the Van der Berg test. So this test is done on the serum and we add diazotized sulfaninic acid. So when we add this, the direct bilirubin gives a red color. So there is a direct reaction. So the conjugated fraction is also known as direct bilirubin. And if we further add alcohol to it, and then after that, if it is given the red color, then that is known as the indirect reaction. And if it is giving color at both the phases, then it is known as the biphasic reaction. So there are three types of reaction: direct, given by the conjugated bilirubin; biphasic, given by both conjugated and unconjugated bilirubin in the serum; and the indirect. Indirect reaction is given when there is predominantly unconjugated bilirubin in the serum. So this was the reason why it is called indirect bilirubin. So when there is unconjugated bilirubin in the blood, it is mostly caused by the hemolytic anemias. When there is increased hemolysis, RBCs are being destroyed, they are dying. So in that case, the RBC turnover is increased. So there is increased in the LDH levels in the body. And you know that when the RBCs are being broken down, it releases heme and globin. So that heme, when it gets increased, it is bound to the haptoglobin. So in case of hemolytic jaundice, the haptoglobin gets used up and its levels are decreased in case of intravascular hemolysis. So these tests can be done in the serum and we can get an idea that there is indirect bilirubin in the serum and there the cause can be hemolysis. So other tests we can do for the mainly for the hemolytic anemias. So we can do the Coombs test. We can do the hemoglobin electrophoresis for conditions like thalassemia, sickle cell anemia. Then we can do the peripheral blood smear examination. We can do the retic count. So we can apply all the battery of hemolytic anemias. The battery of tests are there for hemolytic anemias. We can do in the unconjugated bilirubinemia to rule out that cause. Now in the urine, I have discussed in the last lecture, so you can go to that. So in the urine, there won't be any bilirubin. Why? Because the unconjugated bilirubin, it is water insoluble. It is bound to the albumin and it doesn't come out in the urine. So bilirubin will be absent. So the test that we do for the urine bilirubin is the Foucher's test. Foucher's test, it would be negative in case of unconjugated bilirubinemia. Then second thing is that the urobilinogen will be increased because the liver is still trying to conjugate the bilirubin, although the capacity of the liver is limited, but still some limited amount of bilirubin is being formed, which is conjugated. So that will reach the duodenum, and in the intestine again urobilinogen and stercobilinogen will be formed. So the urobilinogen in the urine will be detected um, by the Ehrlich aldehyde test. And again in the stools also, since stercobilinogen is formed, so it will be either normal color or it can be dark in color. So these were the consequences if there is increased indirect bilirubin in the blood. There is another grave consequence that can happen in the newborn. So, in diseases like hemolytic disease of the newborn, where there is increased hemolysis of the RBCs, condition also known as erythroblastosis fetalis. So, unconjugated bilirubin that is present in the serum, sometimes it is not bound to albumin and it can diffuse into various tissues. It can cross the blood-brain barrier, so it can reach the brain and deposit in the basal ganglia. So that condition is known as kernicterus. You should know what is kernicterus. So deposition of the bilirubin in the brain, it is kernicterus, and that can cause neurological damage in the newborn child. So in this condition again phototherapy is done. So what phototherapy does, it converts unconjugated bilirubin to a soluble product which is lumirubin. So lumirubin is water soluble, so it will be excreted in the urine and the symptoms will be alleviated. Now next we come to the condition where in the serum there is predominantly conjugated hyperbilirubinemia. So the bilirubin is there and the major fraction that is in the serum, it is the conjugated part. Uh, so here there are certain conditions like some congenital conditions where there is deficiency of the canalicular membrane transporters like MRP2 gene. There is defect, there is mutation in the MRP2 gene which is producing the protein MRP2. So this protein is important for the transport of the bile across the canalicular membranes. So this is seen in the Dubin-Johnson syndrome. So in that condition, there will be defective. There will be conjugation will be there, but then there is defective transport. So that will cause conjugated hyperbilirubinemia. Other condition is the Rotor syndrome. Again, in this, the conjugated fraction will increase. Both of these conditions, they are autosomal recessive condition. And to remember this, you can use this mnemonic, which is COD. So conjugated bilirubinemia is seen in Rotor, R for Rotor, and D for Dubin-Johnson syndrome. Another important MCQ for Dubin-Johnson syndrome is in Dubin-Johnson syndrome, the liver becomes dark pigmented due to the presence of epinephrine metabolites. So uh, this is again the differentiating point from the Rotor syndrome. In Rotor syndrome, we won't get the black colored liver, while we see that in the Dubin-Johnson. So this point also you have to remember. Now another condition is the in certain hepatocellular diseases. So the viral hepatitis or cirrhosis, again the liver is affected. So they will be both they will be conjugated bilirubin as well as unconjugated bilirubin because again the liver has limited capacity to conjugate the bilirubin. Now the second condition, certain hepatocellular diseases. In hepatocellular diseases like hepatitis, cirrhosis, the function of the liver is deranged. So it will conjugate bilirubin in a limited capacity. So there will be presence of both conjugated as well as unconjugated bilirubin in the serum. Now the another conditions are the obstruction of the bile duct. So there is I have told about the bile flow in the last lecture. You can go through that. So the bile flows from the liver and through the intrahepatic ducts, it goes into the bile duct. Then bile duct ultimately combines with the pancreatic duct, opens into the ampulla of beta. So if there is any obstruction in the flow of that bile, so that will cause the obstructive jaundice. So there are various causes of the obstruction in the bile duct, like they can be stricture in the common bile duct. So this is the common bile duct, and there can be stricture in the common bile duct. Then there can be defective formation of the biliary channels in congenital biliary atresia. Then the common bile duct can also be obstructed by the presence of CBD stones. They can be parasites. Parasite, which parasite? The liver fluke. Again, MCQ. So Clonorchis sinensis, this is the parasite that can cause the obstruction of the bile duct. Then there can be tumor like cholangiocarcinoma. Then condition like primary sclerosing cholangitis, which is the autoimmune condition affecting the extrahepatic bile ducts, that can again cause the inflammation, fibrosis in the bile duct, causing the obstruction. Then carcinoma, head of pancreas, carcinoma periampullary region. So the when the bile duct, it terminates in the ampulla of Vater and opens into the duodenum. So this region is known as the periampullary region. It consists of part of duodenum, then this ampulla, and common bile duct and head of pancreas. So a tumor can occur in all these regions, this periampullary region, and that will cause the obstruction of the bile duct. Uh, so that can again lead to obstructive jaundice. Now, sometimes there can be intrahepatic obstruction also seen in certain diseases. So that will again also cause the stasis of the bile. So like in cirrhosis, when there is excessive fibrosis, it can cause the obstruction in the intrahepatic bile ducts. In hepatitis, the hepatocytes, they can swell because of the inflammation and again cause the obstruction of the biliary channels. Then condition like primary biliary cholangitis, again autoimmune condition that can cause inflammation, fibrosis in the intrahepatic channels mostly. So in this condition also we will see the cholestasis. So these are the condition in the within the liver. These are the condition outside the liver where that is causing the cholestasis. So in the cholestasis, we can see certain enzymes like alkaline phosphatase, gamma glutamyl transferase that will increase in the serum. We will discuss about it in the later pages. Now, conditions where there is isolated conjugated hyperbilirubinemia. So conditions where there is isolated conjugated hyperbilirubinemia are bile duct obstruction, as the causes I enumerated in the last slide, and then Dubin-Johnson syndrome, Rotor syndrome, where there is a defect in the transport of bile across the canalicular membrane. So these will cause the presence of conjugated hyperbilirubinemia because the bile ducts, they get obstructed, and then these that bilirubin, bile salt, etc. They So now we come to conditions where there is only conjugated bilirubin that is seen in the serum. So uh, one is bile duct obstruction, is of the extrahepatic bile duct that the conditions I enumerated in the last slide, strictures, stones, cancer in the common bile duct. So all those conditions that will cause the bile duct obstruction and that will cause the stasis of the bile and all the conjugated bilirubin that will spill over into the blood along with the bile salts and bile acids. And again, Dubin-Johnson and Rotor syndrome where there is defect in the transport of the conjugated bilirubin. So again, there is stasis of the bile and that spills over into the blood. So there is conjugated bilirubin which is increased in the serum. So this is the condition where we will find a large fraction of conjugated bilirubin in the blood. Now the other condition, the mixed, where we get both conjugated and unconjugated fraction. So that will be seen in hepatocellular jaundice, where the liver is not functioning well because of various diseases like hepatitis, cirrhosis. So here the bilirubin is not being able to conjugate in the liver, but some part of liver that those are functioning normally, they will conjugate the bilirubin to a limited extent. So you will get both conjugated fraction as well as unconjugated fraction, and these facts are important to know because when we know this, then we'll be able to understand how the serum and urine tests they are seen in the different kinds of jaundice. Now, the consequences of conjugated bilirubinemia. So, in case of when there is conjugated hyperbilirubinemia in the blood, the direct fraction of bilirubin is increased. So, direct reaction in the Van der Berg test will be seen. So, in the if we want to know whether it is hepatocellular jaundice caused due to derangement in the liver function or is it obstructive jaundice, we can perform certain tests. So, when there is damage to the liver, so there will be the increase in the hepatocellular enzymes, the enzymes that are present within the hepatocytes, like alanine transaminase, aspartate transaminase. So these enzymes will be increased in the hepatocellular jaundice. Normal range of ALT and ALT is 5 to 35 international units per liter, and AST is 5 to 40 international units per liter. Now these ranges are also important because you will get the problem based question, so you need to know the normal ranges. Then we do the AST to ALT ratio. This ratio, normally it is 1.15. And in alcoholic liver disease, the AST is more than ALT and ratio is more than 2, while in hepatitis, ALT is raised more than AST and the ratio is less than 1. So this is important to differentiate between these two conditions. While on the other hand, if we have case of obstructive jaundice, then generally the enzymes which are increased are the enzymes of the biliary tree. Those are gamma glutamyl transferase, normal range 0 to 30 units per liter. Alkaline phosphatase, normal range 30 to 120 units per liter. Now, alkaline phosphatase, though it is a useful enzyme marker, but it is non-specific because it will also be increased in certain bone diseases and in the case of pregnancy. So, we use 5-nucleotidase as a surrogate marker for ALP. So if ALP is increased and along with that 5-nucleotidase is also increased, so we can make the inference that it is because of the biliary tract obstruction. Now in the urine, if the case is that of obstruction, so if there is obstruction to the flow of the bile, there is obstruction. So in that case, there will be no urobilinogen and no stercobilinogen. So we get clay colored stools in obstructive jaundice, and in addition to that, urobilinogen will be absent in the urine. So because there is biliary tract obstruction. In addition to that, when there is obstruction in the biliary tract, so I told you that the bilirubin, bile salts, bile acids, they spill over into the blood. So there is increased conjugated bilirubin in the blood, and since that is water soluble, so that it will come out in the urine. So in obstructive jaundice, you will get a lot of bilirubin, bile salts in the urine. Now in hepatocellular jaundice, in the urine, urobilinogen may be seen in some amounts because limited amount of conjugation is taking place and then there is no obstruction. So it may be seen in the hepatocellular jaundice. This you have to understand. I told you that clay colored stools are seen in obstructive jaundice, can come in the problem based question, and the color will be normal in hepatocellular jaundice or it can be little darker. Then there is fat malabsorption, so steatorrhea will be seen in the stools. Now this is a table where we'll try to understand the different findings in prehepatic, hepatic and post-hepatic jaundice. Post-hepatic jaundice, also known as obstructive. Hepatic is also known as hepatocellular jaundice, and prehepatic can be also said as hemolytic because hemolysis is the predominant cause of prehepatic jaundice. So now clinically, when we talk about the clinical things, so anemia will be predominantly seen in the hemolytic jaundice or prehepatic jaundice because the RBCs are lysed, so the hemoglobin level will fall down. Then when we talk about, so next clinical symptom is pruritus. Pruritus is because of the bile salts, and it will be the predominant feature of obstructive jaundice. It can be seen transiently in hepatocellular jaundice, but it will be absent in hemolytic jaundice. So with pruritus, you can again infer the type of jaundice. Then bradycardia, again because of the bile salts, so it will be marked in obstructive jaundice, while can be seen in hepatic jaundice, absent in prehepatic jaundice. Now splenomegaly can be seen in hemolytic jaundice, can be a feature, and it can be present in hepatocellular jaundice when the cause is cirrhosis. We can see splenomegaly, or it will be absent in the post-hepatic jaundice. So these features you should know to solve various problem-based questions. Then next, the urine bilirubin. Urine bilirubin, it will be very much high in amount in case of obstructive jaundice because the conjugated bilirubin is spilled over in the blood. It is water soluble, comes out in the urine. Limited conjugation is occurring in hepatocellular jaundice, so this bilirubin may come in the urine. So, and it is absent mostly in the hemolytic jaundice. Then urine urobilinogen, since there is obstruction in post-hepatic jaundice, the urobilinogen will be absent in case of post-hepatic jaundice. In the prehepatic jaundice and hepatic jaundice, we can see urobilinogen. It is more in case of prehepatic jaundice. Now the urine color will be normal in case of prehepatic jaundice, then deep yellow in case of hepatocellular jaundice, and deepest yellow in case of post-hepatic jaundice because of the presence of the bile pigments. Now, urinary bile salts will be markedly increased in case of post-hepatic jaundice, can be seen in hepatocellular jaundice, but absent in prehepatic jaundice. Now, stool color, characteristically clay colored in case of obstruction because no stercobilinogen is coming into the intestine, no urobilinogen formed, so it is clay colored. While in prehepatic jaundice, the stool color will be dark because the urobilinogen and stercobilinogen, they are formed in the intestine, and so it will be dark in color. In hepatocellular jaundice, it will be normal in color. Now, in the serum, the unconjugated bilirubin or the enteric bilirubin, it is markedly increased in prehepatic jaundice, and it will be normal in hepatic and post-hepatic jaundice. There can be some unconjugated bilirubin seen in the blood in hepatocellular jaundice. Then conjugated bilirubin, it is highly increased in case of post-hepatic obstructive jaundice, will be increased in hepatic jaundice, while in hemolytic jaundice, it will be normal. Then haptoglobin levels, I told you that it is seen in hemolytic jaundice, the decreased levels of haptoglobin. So that will be seen in prehepatic jaundice, while absent in both hepatocellular and obstructive jaundice. The serum enzymes, the liver function will be normal in prehepatic jaundice. So those enzymes will be normal in prehepatic jaundice, while the LDH, which is the enzyme for the increased cell turnover, that will be increased in prehepatic jaundice. Again, the ALT and AST, the enzymes which mark the hepatocyte integrity, they will be increased in case of hepatic jaundice since there is hepatocellular damage. While the enzymes present in the biliary tree, GGT, gamma glutamyl transferase, and alkaline phosphatase, they will be increased in case of post-hepatic jaundice. Another enzyme, 5-nucleotidase, that will also be increased in post-hepatic jaundice. So these are the important facts that you should remember, and this will help you to solve the problems in jaundice. And the clinical, the key points, again, I will revise these. So if there is anemia, there is family history, then you can think about hemolytic jaundice. There is jaundice. Now, when a case of jaundice occurs, and there are certain clues that are given in the question, so you can think about the different differential diagnosis. Like if there is jaundice, along with anemia and family history, you think of hemolytic jaundice. Can be sickle cell anemia, can be thalassemia. Then, if there is jaundice with constitutional symptoms, like there is nausea, there is fever, so you think about hepatitis. Then, if there is fever with chills and rigors and jaundice, then you think of cholangitis. Now, if the clue is splenomegaly and there is jaundice also, then you think about the two causes. If there is unconjugated bilirubin, then think about hemolytic jaundice. And if the conjugated fraction is shown increased in that question, you think about cirrhosis. Then if the jaundice is present along with a tender liver, because there is inflammation of liver, there is hepatitis, so liver becomes tender. Uh, in that case, uh, you should think of hepatitis. And lastly, if there is jaundice and they have given a history of colicky pain, so you think about the etiology as stones in the biliary tract. Now, the various investigations, if there is a question of jaundice which comes in the exams also, then you have to write the approach and you have to write the various investigations that you will do. So this is just a summary of what all I have told you in this lecture. So you do serum bilirubin by the Van der Berg reaction, direct, indirect, and accordingly you can interpret. Then you do the liver enzymes, the hepatocellular enzymes increased in hepatocellular jaundice, SGOT or AST, SGPT or ALT, then the ratio of AST to ALT, then biliary tract enzymes are gamma glutamyl transferase, alkaline phosphatase, 5' nucleotidase. So that will be helpful to diagnose any case of obstructive jaundice. Then serum haptoglobin and serum LDH that will help you to diagnose hemolytic anemia. Then if you want to test the function of the liver as a whole, you do serum albumin, serum globulin, because liver has got the synthetic function and it synthesizes these proteins. So the serum albumin levels normal 3.5 to 5 gram per dl. Then serum globulin level 2 to 3.5 gram per dl. Now the increased globulins are seen in case of autoimmune liver disease cirrhosis that can cause jaundice also. Now prothrombin time, since liver synthesizes the various clotting factors. So PT will be prolonged in case of the if there is injury to the liver. Then in the urine, you do bilirubin by the Foucher's test. We do urobilinogen by the Eldridge aldehyde test, and biosalt by the Hayes sulfur test. So the name of these tests you should know for the exams. Now we can do specific investigation to rule out specific diseases like autoimmune etiology. We can rule out by the various antibody levels like anti-nuclear antibody, anti-mitochondrial antibody, anti-SMA antibodies. Then hepatitis screen we can do to rule out hepatitis. For hemolytic anemias, various tests you can do hemoglobin electrophoresis, complete blood count, peripheral blood smear, reticulocyte, Coombs test, and so on. There are a lot of tests for hemolytic anemia that we can do to come to a definite diagnosis of that particular hemolytic anemia. Now next we do the imaging. So imaging we do we can do to rule out the obstructive causes. Then we can also do in the hepatocellular causes like hepatitis, cirrhosis. So in all those cases, the ultrasound will be useful. Then for the obstructive causes, we can do uh, magnetic resonance cholangiopancreatography and endoscopic retrograde cholangiopancreatography. So these tests can also be done uh, for the for ruling out the various causes of jaundice. Then lastly, we can do liver biopsy to find out any pathology that is present in the liver. Now lastly, we can just have a look at some problem-based question that and we can apply the knowledge that we have gained in this lecture. So just three quick questions. First, there is a 25-year-old intravenous drug abuser. It complains of nausea, vomiting, and loss of appetite. So there are constitutional symptoms in this patient. The serum enzyme levels are SGPT is 2000, SGOT is 1900. So we know that these levels are higher than the normal range. Bilirubin is again, it is 10 milligram percent. That is, it is jaundice. Jaundice, we get more than 2 milligram percent. And the direct bilirubin fraction, which is normally less than 0.3, it is 6 milligram percent. So there is increased in the conjugated or direct bilirubin. There is increased in the total bilirubin levels. Then plus there are increased ALT, AST levels. So ALT is also known as SGOT, ALT, SGPT. So these levels are increased. Then other clue is constitutional symptoms. And lastly, the patient is a IV drug abuser. So all these points, these are the points which are favoring us a diagnosis of hepatitis. Now there is increased conjugated bilirubin in the blood. So in hepatitis, there is limited conjugation occurring. So conjugated bilirubin will increase. Then total bilirubin levels are also increased. And then the ALT and AST. So these are the hepatocellular enzymes. So there is hepatocellular damage going on. So constitutional symptoms like fever, nausea, they point um, towards the etiology of hepatitis. And in hepatitis, we can say that in hepatitis B and C, we can have the history of IV drug abuse. So the diagnosis in this case is hepatitis, and we will rule out hepatitis B and C in this individual. So this is a case of hepatocellular jaundice caused by hepatitis. One second sample question is 10-year-old female is a female child presented in the medicine OPD with complaints of yellowish skin. That is presence of there is a child and there is yellowish discoloration, that is jaundice. Then there is dizziness, episodes of chest pain. So chest pain is there. In physical examination, there is pallor, that means there is anemia and presence of jaundice. Ultrasound reveals absent of the spleen. So their spleen is absent. So there is a condition of anemia along with jaundice. So we can think that there is some hemolytic jaundice. Then there are episodes of chest pain. So we should think of hemolytic jaundice which are having the episodes of pain. So that is seen in the pain crisis. It is seen in sickle cell anemia. So we get the pain crisis, and in that we know there is a phenomena of autosplenectomy due to the infarction. So that is why there is absent spleen. So it is a case of hemolytic or pre-hepatic jaundice, possibly due to the sickle cell anemia. Now the last question. The 50-year-old male complains of dark colored urine, clay colored stools since 3 weeks. So the stools are clay colored. So that means there is some obstruction in the biliary tract. And the urine is also dark. Urine will be dark when there is increased bile pigments in the urine. So he has generalized itching. Itching is because of the increased bile salts. It is seen in obstructive jaundice. Then clay colored stools, again seen in obstructive jaundice. Then imaging shows a periampullary lesion. So there is a periampullary area, is the area where the ampulla of Vater opens. So near the second part of duodenum. So if they are saying that there is a periampullary lesion, the lesion can be in the ampulla of Vater. The lesion can be in the head of pancreas. It can be in the terminal part of CBD, because the CBD is coming here and it is combining with the pancreatic duct and then then opening into the ampulla of Vater. So there can be some lesion in the terminal part of CBD, or the lesion can be in the duodenum itself. His total bilirubin is 14 milligram percent. So bilirubin is increased and the direct bilirubin level is very high, that is 10. It should be less than 0.3. Alkaline phosphatase level, I told you that it is between 30 to 120 unit per liter. It is very much increased because in obstructive jaundice, this enzyme is increased. So the diagnosis is obstructive jaundice, and the lesion can be various tumors in the periampullary region, in the duodenum, in the terminal part of CBD, in the pancreatic duct or the head of pancreas or the ampulla. And then what are the urinary biochemical findings? So in case of obstructive jaundice, we know that the increase in the level of bile salts and increase in the bilirubin in urine. Why? Because the conjugated fraction is increased. So that is soluble, water soluble, and it comes out in the urine. Since there is obstruction, So there will be no urobilinogen. So these are the urinary findings in this case. So this is how you approach to such questions on jaundice. So this was this lecture on pathophysiology of jaundice. I hope it was useful. And if any query or question regarding jaundice is there, you can just post that in the comment section. I will reply to it. And thank you very much.